Well, some people are starting to receive their W-2s and can't wait to file their tax refund, especially if they are going to be getting some of their hard-earned money back from the government.
Probably only if they're getting the money back.
Otherwise, I don't want to wait till the last minute.
But even if we have our W-2s,
He knows that.
can we file our tax return today? CPA and financial expert Marshall Gunn is here, and he's helped us weave through the tax process last year, and now he's back for another Tax Tip Tuesday season. Welcome back, Marshall.
Glad to be here.
It's
always a pleasure
to see you.
I'm just so glad he just didn't do the voice. I just felt like the voice was coming on, but then he held off at the last minute.
And you're bringing it up, so Marshall Gunn. Speaking of, the Marshall is back.
Marshall's back in town.
So, if we have our W-2s, can we file today?
No.
Oh.
Okay.
I know you want that refund, Nick, but unfortunately, you know, Congress passes a law, President signs it into, you know, the act, and boom. All of a sudden, the computers are supposed to be ready to accept everything. Not
ready.
happening.
Yeah.
So it was going to be January 22nd. Now the IRS has moved it back to January 30th.
Ooh.
And depending on how
That could
complex
still
your tax return is, you know,
Yeah.
that short form will probably get in January 30th. If you've got, you know, all kinds of schedules and stuff, might be a little after that.
Mine's
so
a mess.
That refund for Valentine's Day, probably not going to happen. So find another way.
Another way. I'm picking flowers out of my neighbor's garden.
Yeah, right.
Easy.
I don't know if that's... Anyway, so listen, the fiscal cliff, that was making a lot of news. This was right before the new year. This was the 112th Congress. This is before the 113th was sworn in January, so this was the Congress proceeding. Because this was a last-minute deal, and we're going to go a little bit in-depth about what the fiscal cliff legislation means. But first, what does it mean for taxpayers?
Well, for your average taxpayer, really there's very minimal impact except for that 2% expiration of the tax holiday on their FICA taxes. So if you've gotten a paycheck already, you've already seen, ooh, pay cut. Not really a pay cut, just a tax holiday that expired, and now you're paying the full rate on FICA.
It's a tax increase on the middle class is basically what
it really is. So if your check, you know, if you make $1,000 gross on that check, oop, extra $20 came out, and it's simple math. But if you were in the 25% tax bracket last year, yeah, you're in the 25% bracket this year if your income's the same. So not dramatic changes, but something that you'll feel in your wallet.
Yeah.
And with the change, what is now considered the wealthy?
The wealthy line got drawn. You know, for 4 years we heard it was 250,000. Now it's 450,000. So I guess the rich got poorer and the poor got wealthier. So I don't know how that works exactly. But 450 on a married couple. We've got 425 if you're head of household and 400 if you're single. So we've got kind of a marriage penalty that came in here because it used to be that, you know, married joint was 2 times single. Well, now 2 times single is 800,000. It's not even close anymore. So you do have that penalty in there now.
So let's talk about some of the other highlights that this legislation brought about. And we talked about the FICA payroll tax going up by 2%. That's a big one.
That is
because
a huge
I saw that on Yahoo, the front page of Yahoo. There was an article. Why is my paycheck less than it was last year? Why is it? Well, that's the 2% payroll tax
That's the
increase.
2%.
What are some of the other ones?
Well, capital gains on the wealthy now. Capital gains are 20% instead of 15%. So that was an increase. Dividend tax 20% instead of 15%. Again, for your average taxpayer, no change. We've got the 39.6% as that top tax rate instead of 35%, which is really kind of weird because for singles, the amount that's taxed at 35% is only about $1,300. So it's almost like, why have a bracket, you know, for $1,300? So it's very, very small. We had a 1-year extension of a lot of business tax extenders on depreciation and types of things that business would deduct. There are a lot of extenders that were made retroactive to January 1 of 2012, which was interesting because the law wasn't signed in until 2013, so it's kind of hard to go back and create a deduction that you wanted to take in 2012 but you didn't do. So it was kind of a forgiveness, not permission type of scenario. It's like, okay, so how do you plan when time has expired before you
know that something is
know something's there? Really, really fascinating. So.
And then
does that affect teachers and?
Yeah, we got teachers. Some of the great things, for example, the $250 in supplies that teachers get to deduct. I mean, let's face it. If you ever worked with a teacher, you know, $250 that's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
They usually spend a lot more out of their own pocket for that. Now they can continue to deduct those. There's just a number of items that are in there. The deductibility of your home mortgage insurance, not your homeowner's insurance, home mortgage insurance, that was reinstated back into the law. If you went through an unfortunate situation where your personal residence was foreclosed upon or you surrendered it in lieu of foreclosure, that forgiveness of debt came back in as a non-taxable item. only on your personal residence, though. So it was good to see a couple of things come back in so that we wouldn't suddenly cripple the economy.
Right. And then you uncovered some unusual items in the Tax Act.
There are some very interesting things in the Tax Act. You know, you're thinking about the fate of the nation is hanging in the balance.
Yeah, the waning hours of the burning the midnight oil.
Heavy negotiations.
Right.
But somehow special interest groups seem to slip things in. For example, some tax-free bonds for the New York Enterprise Zone, which happens to be where Goldman Sachs is located. So as a result, they'll be able to have a little lower rent. You know, Goldman Sachs kind of shaky, so you know we need lower rent for a large corporation like that. We've got American Samoa got a special tax credit for the tuna fishing activity that goes on by Starkist. So that's another one that, you know, just really a pressing item that had to get through in the tax code. And there are a dozen of those in there that come into play.
Very cool. Now, we're so glad that you are back to inform us. You're an encyclopedia of tax information, and it's like, oh, thank goodness he is back. Do you have some kind of special for our viewers that if they want to come in and see you and make sure that
everything... Because the tax code is
everything...
confusing. Can we just say that?
Can we just give you all our paperwork? And isn't there something you can do, like to go back now?
Well,
and,
that's the key,
get us
is
some
that
money?
now looking back at 2011, 10, and 9, those tax years are still open. And we do a free review of those 3 prior years' returns to see if you left some money on the table. So it's a case of, what do you got to lose? It's a free second opinion. And as a result of that, you'd be surprised how many amended returns we file for clients and able to get them a little cash back, and they become loyal clients for a long time, obviously.
Very cool.
Marshall,
Now
we'd
if
be
you
glad to
find
do
that we
that.
actually still owe some money, can we forget about that? Or how does
What? Never heard of such a thing. There is that implication that it's better to find it and correct it than for the IRS to come back and found it and now want it plus penalties and interest.
Yeah,
Mess.
there you go.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Marshall Gunn. We appreciate
My
you being
pleasure.
here and the valuable insights, and Gunn, Chamberlain, PL and Gunn and Company Investment Management for sponsoring this segment.
And we're happy to have Marshall back on board for Tax Tip Tuesdays. If you'd like to schedule an appointment with one of Marshall's CPAs, just call 904-296-2024 or log on to gunchamberlain.com for a wealth of financial information.